Hi, everyone. This is Krista Moore with The Krista Moore Show. I'm excited that you've joined us today. This show is brought to you by K Coaching as a new way to learn from industry experts and thought leaders as they share their growth ideas and success stories. And we have a great guest today, and I'm really anxious for you to get to know her. Her name is Nancy Bleeke, and she's the president, she's an author, she's the founder of her own company called Sales Pro Insider, and she has a ton to share with us today. So hi, Nancy.
Hi, Krista. Thanks so much for hosting me.
Sure, I'm glad to have you. It's a subject that I know that our audience is really interested in because both of us have been in sales, and now we do a lot of sales consulting and training, but we know that it is just kind of innate in us to be a little apprehensive about the rejection in sales. So we're definitely going to get into that today.
Great.
Before we begin, I would love for them to get to know you a little bit. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Bleeke, as Krista said, and I have a mission to help people be more comfortable with sales. And that means us that are either maybe small business owners or reluctant salespeople, or whether we're a true full-on 100% salesperson, or whether we're on the buying end of the sales equation. I believe that we can make sales more comfortable for everyone involved, and we help companies and people within those companies learn the skill set, have the process, and build not only the competence, but the confidence to be successful in helping other people get what you offer.
You know, we talked earlier about how there's this connotation that exists about sales in general. And we were having this conversation, and it was interesting when you were describing about it kind of being a mindset or something that we learn at an early age. Why don't you tell me and the audience a little bit more about that?
Well, none of us are born with fear or reluctance for anything, right? We're not born. We learn those over time. And I think that there's so many things that contribute to people's mindset around negativity towards selling, from messages we got when we were growing up to the way it's portrayed in the media for different things, our own experiences as a buyer. And so the story I tell is, growing up, I'm from a large Italian family in Wisconsin, and there was an uncle that was the insurance salesman, and he took care of everybody. He was the one that whenever you got your license, the first person you called. He was the person when the tornado took down our garage, was the first person to get everything taken care of. But every time his name was referenced, my dad called him Louis the Thief.
Louis
And so you don't, Louis the Thief, Louis the Thief. So just subliminal messaging like that contributes to the fact that once I graduated college, if there was any job that seemed like there could be a sales aspect of it, I tapped out very quickly because I didn't want to be Nancy the Thief.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because there's so many people that are in sales today that they did not graduate with a sales degree. And now there are colleges that are offering like School of Sales. And I think there's like 17 or so, maybe even more than that, through the School of Sales. And I find that fascinating.
I'm so glad for it because, as I've talked with parents who have kids in college, or I talked to college students and I said, have you considered a career in sales? And even if the student who's, 20, 21, 22 says, yes, I have had multiple parents say, nope, he went to school to be an engineer. Well, do you know how much money and how much success a sales engineer can have?
Yeah, right.
But the parents are like, nope, that's not what they went to school for. So the addition of sales as a real profession, and with colleges backing, equipping people to be successful with it, I think is a huge positive sign.
Oh, it is. And I just want to talk about that subject a little bit longer because there may be folks on the line that never heard of this or realize that there are colleges that are graduating students that understand sales enablement and sales process and selling skills. And it's a great person to interview and potentially grab and nab right out of college. And I was coaching one of them at the University of Ohio, and she got a job right out of college with a pharmaceutical company making 6 figures. because they didn't have to invest in that 2 or 3 years of internal training because she already had that with her college degree. So just kind of a good to know.
It is. I'm on the board of University of Wisconsin Parkside, and their students in their sales program, they have like 10 times the demand for hiring out of the program than people in the program. I mean, that's how many companies are learning how valuable that can be. So
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it kind of goes back to changing the mindset. And so if we have salespeople today that they're getting these messages in their head, where they might be perceived as the used car salesman,
Yeah.
or they might be perceived as pushy, what would you say to them, or what would you recommend to them?
Well, I think it's the way we think about selling and what is selling. And I think there's a lot of people that don't really know what it is. So then it's easy to give it, something that we should be afraid of. And that selling, people talk about the born salesman. And unfortunately, the born salesman, when people say that, is typically not a positive thought. That's a person who's very outgoing, maybe talks too much even. They, never met a stranger. And that people see that that's what you have to be if you're going to be in sales. And if you really think about what selling is, and selling at its core, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, Krista, selling at its core is simply helping someone else make a decision or take an action. And we're doing that throughout every aspect of our lives. We're helping people work through the information exchange that needs to happen. And we call it the conversation that needs to happen for that person to confidently do something. And if we can think about that's what selling is, that's one way of starting to change the mindset around it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it too. It's more of a service.
It is.
When you were describing before the mindset, I was thinking of the guy that's told, and I say guy because it has been a very male-dominated industry, sales has. He could sell ice to an Eskimo, which is really not perceived as a nice compliment. It's almost
Right.
like it's distrusting, or you're trying to sell something to somebody that doesn't even need it.
Right.
And so that's what I like about what you just described is, of service.
It
But
is of
yeah,
service.
and we try and teach in a lot of our training the art of selling, of understanding and
Mhm.
listening, and being able to understand what the other person's needs are and really communicate from their perspective. And that way it's not me, I, and it doesn't feel so self-serving.
And it's not if you're in an information exchange, right? They need information and you need information.
Mhm.
But the thing is just what you said, we've got to learn information about them first, because then if we can't connect what we have to them, it's probably not relevant and we shouldn't be taking up their time. So I always tell people, if you do think about pitching, or you think about, which I hate that term, I hate
Mhm.
the term pitching, because being pitched at means,
Yeah.
you've got to be ready to what? Duck, catch, you've got options. But if you have a conversation and you're in it with another human being, because like we don't call on businesses, nobody calls on a business. A business doesn't talk.
Mhm.
People
They're
within the
not
business do.
humans.
Yeah, we're kind of
Yeah.
humans. And so if we're starting to find ourselves talking and we can't connect what we're talking about specific to that person, what matters to them, not just their problems, but hey, what are they doing where there's an opportunity to do something better because of what we could help them with, but they don't even know it. So it's education,
Mhm.
and what are their wants and needs. We need to understand that story. Then we've earned the right. So we have to earn the right for their time, attention, and for them to be willing to hear, here's what I do, or here's what I have, and why it matters to you.
There's been a change in maybe sales training trends as I've been researching some of that. We're, we're trying to get salespeople to communicate from the buyer's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and consultative selling. And I'm thinking that those new skill-based training elements will up-level the selling skills so that the buyer doesn't perceive the salesperson to be like the old traditional knock on doors, trying to sell me something kind of guy.
Well, and I think that buyers have a buyer's behaviors, right? They have expectations also that are put up barriers. I have to put up barriers. I have to protect myself.
Yeah,
So
that's so
when you're
true.
the person trying to seek to understand them and ask them questions that get them thinking or get them talking about something more than they've had anyone else be interested in, that's relevant, of course, to the situation, you differentiate yourself very quickly because they're expecting a pitch.
Hmm.
They're expecting you to start telling them what they should be doing. And so
That
you
just
change the
reminded me.
dynamic.
It just reminded me of something. When I was a young salesperson, I was thrown into sales without training. But then I remember we went through, you probably know this training, PSS.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it was like everyone took
Professional
PSS.
sales system. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody in the world took PSS. Um, and then I started training and teaching it for the company that I worked for. But I remember going in with a sales rep, and he was practicing his PSS on the buyer, and the buyer said, "What'd you just take a PSS training class?"
Oh,
I was like, "Oh, and now what do we say?" I mean, so there is something to say for, being trained to talk differently, but you don't want to sound like a robot either, right?
exactly. That's really funny. That's why we call our training is called genuine sales, because it's about having good frameworks, good resources, good best practices, but you got to be yourself so that you're not showing up as somebody else, because then
Yeah.
trust isn't like people sense that. They feel something's just not right.
Well, and we used to teach salespeople that they needed to be like a chameleon, mirroring the buyer and all of that. And there's some elements of that that I really think probably still stand today. But people want to buy from people that they know and they love and they trust. And the only way you're going to get there is by being yourself. And so that authentic sales approach is going to work, 9 times out of 10 than,
It's
going in with
interesting. One of the research, there's research from 2018, and it talks about how buyers want the salesperson to lead with transparency. That's one of the top, I think, 6 or 8 qualities that they're looking for in anyone selling to them is that
Mhm.
you are genuine, you are authentic, you are transparent because you're asking them, they want to know who you are too, which doesn't mean you tell them your life story. I say even when you're asking questions, you can start giving away some of yourself. You can say, as I've worked with, other fill in the blank, as I've worked with other small business owners, one of the things that I've noticed is this.
Mhm.
How does that play out in your world? So you can bring in credibility, you can bring in, like I can bring in one of the things I always tell them, I had, I had 5 brothers like that, I'm a tough person, like I always say, and still living. So
I had 3.
I,
Growing up with brothers are great.
I know my mom told me someday you are going to be so happy because you're not going to see men as something different. And it's really been true in my career because,
Mhm.
like you said, in the sales world, it was so many men. I am so thrilled to see now that, often a third or more, people in a larger group are women. But anyway, but that's part of who I am. I mean, part of my story is, growing up in a large family, a large Italian family with a lot of brothers. And it plays in on how I work with people, how I'm a stick-to-itive person. I don't give up. And so if there's something going on, I'm going to make it right. Like all of it plays in. And
Yeah.
at first, here's my funny story. So when I first started out in my own consulting firm 22 years ago, and I had a huge opportunity, like within the first month, and the woman that brought me in, it was a 9-person decision-making committee. And she told me that there were certain things how I needed to dress, how I needed to sound. She had me scripted. And because she wanted me to get the
Oh,
business.
to get you ready for the meeting.
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. So after the fact, there was 9 people on the committee. It was several meetings over weeks, lots of huge proposals, all this. And at the end, when they called me to say they loved what I represented and what we had, but they didn't want me doing the delivery. And they wanted me to find someone who was older, preferably bald, preferably with military experience, that could walk in the room and have a presence. And it was a big 5-year contract. So I found that guy,
Yeah.
to make this happen. And it was a very challenging 5 years. After a year and a half, I was with a section of the leaders at something, and this woman, not the one that prepped me, another woman said, "Where were you during the selling process?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, where was I?" Like, I was the one doing all the work, whatever. And she goes, "No, you were not there. It was like you were Vanna White." She said, "You said the right things, you looked right, you whatever, but you weren't there." She goes, "Oh my gosh, in this time of getting to know you, you are smart. But we didn't see any of that, and now we're stuck with him." Like, they weren't happy.
Yeah,
But
that's a
but
great story.
oh my gosh, not being genuine. I was playing a role
Hmm.
that a well-meaning person set me up for,
Yeah.
but it
Well,
worked
and
against.
it was your first opportunity too out of
Huge, huge,
engagement.
huge
You weren't gonna
opportunity,
blow
right?
it.
Big opportunity. Yeah. So,
That's a great story.
yeah.
And that was probably a really good kind of in your face, like, hey, I am worthy to do this. This is my stuff. And I can be the face person of this message and of the company.
I'd like to say it came about that quickly. I heard it, but it still took me time to believe it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes.
Some of the things that you talk about in your book and you speak a lot about and train around are ways to have winning conversations. So
Mhm.
I'd like for you to walk through 3 or 4 steps, whatever you think is appropriate,
Mhm.
for our audience to learn how to build kind of that confidence in being a salesperson and how to have those winning conversations.
Great. So I think that's one of the things, right? Is a lot of times people are also afraid because we don't know how to. First we don't know what selling is, but then we don't know how to, structure that conversation. We know we're supposed to ask questions. We know we're supposed to listen. We know we're supposed to talk about value, but how do we put that all together? And so we use a structure based on the philosophy, the whole approach. Krista had talked about consultative selling. We talk about collaborative selling. Collaboration, to me, is actually one level above consultative selling because it means I'm comfortable enough to do this with another person versus I know everything and now I have to tell you. So we use the what's in it for them, WIIFT, to map out the framework to a productive conversation. And so it starts with waiting, which wait means being prepared. We can prepare in advance for the situation. We can do research on the person, on the business, on what they're currently maybe using or doing, depending on what we're selling. But we need to get prepared in advance. And then the moments before contact, we also need to take those, maybe it's moments, maybe it's 3 minutes, but we need to get our head prepared. And that means we've got to eliminate distractions, prepare to focus on them, not be worrying about what's our pitch. It should be more about what do I need to learn? How am I going to earn their trust? And how am I going to guide them? I'm the leader. How am I going to guide them through a decision-making process to help them come to a confident decision? So that's where the conversation starts, really, is in us being prepared. And then we initiate our conversations. And people know we've been starting conversations since we were 2, most likely. But in starting a conversation, we again have to set the stage for collaboration and show that we're different. And we do that by first connecting with a human being. And not everyone wants to get into personal connection, but that's one of the nuances is what can I get them, what can I ask them that's something they might want to talk about, depending on their role, depending on their geography, depending on the business that they're in, that helps break the ice and helps them break their preoccupation and earns us the right, to move forward. And the last thing we have to do as we start a conversation is to get on a shared objective, a shared agenda. And I know people always walk in saying, here's my objective,
Mhm.
but you know what? They don't care. Like, what is it that you want to make sure that happens today? What do we want to accomplish? So
Yeah,
that's,
or even saying, does that sound okay to you? Or,
yes,
did I miss anything? Something that you were describing that, what's it? Is that what it
yeah,
is? WIFT?
whip it. Whip
Is,
it good. Do, 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 do.
that's what comes to mind for me. I'm over
Me
here
too.
dancing while I was off screen. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the typical salesperson is winging it. And I remember many times in my career when I was in sales, I felt like maybe I might have been winging it too, thinking, oh, I know what I'm doing. I got this, and then not really doing that upfront research that I could have done, or not really being prepared with an agenda. And what a waste of time, right?
For you and for them. So two things. So we've done some research on this. We've done control studies within clients, and the group that agreed to prepare every call had 17 to 25% better outcomes than the other group. I mean, that's huge. That's like, I always say, that's the one discipline. Build it, but you have to do good prep, right? And that is mapping out the full conversation. The second research we did is that for every minute of preparation, you save 1.7 minutes. So preparation isn't extra time. Everyone says, I don't have time. I know it's important, but I run out of time. But it's really not more time. It's a transfer of our time. Because if we can get ahead of it and prepare, we're going to save so much time accomplishing what needs to in that conversation. And most importantly, I think, in the chase and follow up afterward.
Yeah.
When we've been more productive.
I want to add a thought, because
Okay.
I know a lot of salespeople that are reluctant to have their sales leader or sales manager go out in the field with them because they don't want to be watched, or they're used to being independent, or they're probably not really prepared, or they go to see the same people all the time, and they're going to have to get out of their comfort zone, or there's just that reluctance, right? But I challenge you to have a day in the field where you practice what Nancy's talking about. Really prepare for each of those sales calls, getting down the conversation, having the agenda, and doing the research up front, not only on prospects, but current clients and what they're buying and not buying, and trends and things like that, what's going on in their industry, so that you could have these value-based conversations. And then you say to your boss, why don't you go out in the field with me and show them what you're made of, and show them the proper way that it should be done. And I'm kind of reverse rolling there, because I think that would be an awesome way for you to spend some time in the field with your manager. And then hopefully afterwards, you do the curbside coaching, right? Okay, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What could I have done different? And if he or she, your manager, doesn't prompt that, I want you to. I want you to say, I'd like you to give me some feedback. What could I do different next time? I mean, these are simple little changes in your behavior that could make a really big difference in your performance and in your confidence. That's my rant.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
We have to be able to self-coach, and self-coach means tapping into the resources that we have available to us. And if we're not doing things that make us a little uncomfortable, not uncomfortable that, oh my gosh, this is like, questioning my values, but a little uncomfortable just in, can I do this?
Yeah.
Well, we're not growing. And you've heard that whole thing, right? Do you have 20 years of experience or 1 year of experience 20 times,
Yeah. Well, and the reason that I put that challenge out there is it's important to me that when we have guests that are going to take 30 minutes out of their day to join in the show, it is to continuously learn and develop. But I want them to get on the fast track, and I want them to take action from what they've learned instead of just listening to this conversation. So that's going to be my challenge to them, is to take that one idea of doing something differently and it be aligned to a best practice for having a great conversation and, getting your confidence in sales. You'll have less rejection if you're more prepared.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're more confident, and you get to be present. I think that's one of the big things we hear from our, participants is, I'm more present because I know where I'm going to go, or I know where I need to go at the right time. So when they're talking, I'm not thinking about, so what's the next thing I need to ask, or, how am I going to do this? I know I can look at my notes, and so I can be listening better.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you want to make sure that you share with the audience? Some things that maybe you've learned over the years that can help salespeople have more winning conversations?
Productive conversations, yeah. Well, I think it's, always thinking about setting the right expectations, and that you're the one that is the guide and the lead. That doesn't mean you're being aggressive and pushing them somewhere they don't want to go, but you've got to be the leader. And that means setting the expectations. So depending on your sales process, if you're meeting with them once or twice, or let them know. So the next time we meet, here's what we're going to do. Here's the, the decision that you'll be ready to make at that time. And that helps them start conditioning into, okay, this doesn't have to be dragged out further. The other thing is that throughout, we only got through the start of the conversation, but throughout each part of the conversation, you have to earn the right to the next part. You have to earn the right for them to want to be in it with you. And you should be checking, are they with me or not? And too many people end conversations, too many salespeople end conversations with assumptions versus specifics. And so we assume that because they've completed a conversation with us and they said, sure, send me something, send me pricing, send me a proposal, that means they're interested. And it doesn't. You have to see, what are they, right? What are they willing to do? If someone is asking you to put together something that takes you more than 15 minutes, that's what I use as a guideline. You should be saying, all right, I'm willing to put that together. And you know what? Let's schedule another call, another conversation to discuss the information so I can answer the questions for you, and et cetera. And if they're not willing to do that, and well, just send it to me and I'll let you know, they are not.
They're not going to go any, they're not going to move forward regardless.
No, and then you're chased.
We always used a closing, kind of a recap, recap closing. But for example, if they said, send me prices and I'll compare them to my current supplier. And then of course the sales rep does that and then keeps calling to follow up and they don't get their phone call returned. And we know how that goes. But if you were to say, if I come back with a service offering and competitive pricing, will you make us your primary supplier? So you're asking for the yes before you go ahead and do all of that. And that goes back to, well, if they say no, or if they say, well, that's not my decision, I mean, you can find out a whole lot more based on how they react to that.
Absolutely. If they're not willing to do anything specific, then you've got to be careful what you're willing to do. I always say, if you're walking out with all the homework, then the level of engagement is too low. They're not in it with you, and you should put your efforts into those that are.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to what you were referring as collaboration, because this sales process should be collaborative between the seller and the buyer. And when it feels one-sided, it's probably not going to end well.
That's really true. That's really true. And if it's one-sided, they get to sit back, I could say, as the judge and jury, right? That's what they're doing. They're not in it. And so, yeah, if they're not willing to do anything, so that's one of my big tips is we're always earning the right to what's next and making sure they're along that path with us. And that's what's going to help you make sure you're spending time. It also is what's going to keep you from feeling you're being aggressive or you're bothered. Oh, I don't want to follow up again. I'm bothering them.
Right.
Well, hey, if what you're offering is going to be helpful to them, you're not bothering them.
Well, and if they already agreed on the next step, then you're not bothering them.
Right. You're just, maybe whatever happened, but now we just had somebody 11 months. He's been following up with somebody who said they were they were willing to do something and then didn't. And then out of the blue, the buyer called and said, there's just been so much going on. I don't even want to get into it, but I'm ready. So
I love it when that happens.
I know, but people stop. I mean, what the statistics say that people stop after typically, I think, 2 or 3 contacts, and buyers might need 5 to 12.
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect there. But again, if we think of ourselves as we're the leader, we're the guide in helping them make a confident decision, we've got to take that role on and that responsibility that we're going to keep this alive as long as we haven't been told no, and as long as we've made sure that they've given us good buying signals along the way so that we're not wasting our time.
And I always taught too, if it's not a yes, it's a no. So if you're asking a question and they're not saying yes, they're saying, well, maybe, or I mean, it's a no. So that's kind of like something to be thinking about, right? So you want to hear that yes all the way through your sales process.
Very true.
Or you're not handling an objection that maybe you're not even aware that there is one.
We could do a whole half hour on objections.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I knew we could talk for hours on this subject because we have so much in common. And you certainly are the expert in this area. So I'm glad that you were able to join us today. Is it okay if I share some contact information?
That'd be great.
Yeah, right here we've got it. Let me bring that up. And Conversations That Sell is your book. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and where they can get it?
So Conversations That Sell, you can buy it on Amazon. It's still in some bookstores as well, or you can reach out to me. I'll send you a copy. And it really is the description of a whole conversation with a lot of examples, how-tos, some tools that will help you. And it really resonates with people who are more reluctant in their selling efforts, either their mindset or they never saw themselves and now it's part of their job. And so it's that's where I came from. And so I've made it so that it makes it comfortable. You can look at it, you can read them, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, thanks again for joining us. And I'm just wanted to share a couple of things with the audience real quick. When you watch a Krista Moore show, we end up saving the recording and we put it on a channel called Go To Stage. It's actually part of Go To Webinar, but it's Go To Stage. I have the Krista Moore channel in Go To Stage. And as you can see here, you can see any past show and search and find what you're looking for. And the URL is right there in the middle of the page, gotostage.com/channel/Krista Moore Show. So I hope you will check that out on those Wednesdays that you can't make the show. And also I wanted to make sure of two additional things. These are things that are happening at K Coaching right now. And since I've got you, I want you to be aware. We are announcing our Spring 2020 Business Retreat. We've taken the book Race to Amazing and we put it into a retreat format. So I'm looking forward to going to Evans Mill. And I've been there 5 times on various retreats, fabulous place. And we have an awesome program to really get you to do some self-discovery, detox, and start putting your dreams into action. So I look forward to that. And in addition, we have seats available for our online learning, a special promotion going on now. It ends on the 15th. And that is you can purchase a year's worth of seats, unlimited access for your entire company at a really low price. It even gets down to maybe like $6 a month per sales rep. So it's something you might want to look into if you're looking for what are we doing for learning and development in 2020. So I wanted to share those things with you and thank you for being with us. And I look forward to seeing you during the next show. Take care.